Okay, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to AAC in the Cloud 2024. I'm super excited to have Hannah Foley presenting on dynamic assessment, AAC tools and intervention plans for today and tomorrow. Hannah, take it away.
Hello and welcome to Dynamic Assessment, AAC Tools and Intervention Plans for Today and Tomorrow. I'm Hannah Foley and an assistive technology specialist concentrating in AAC. I am the support and implementation specialist at Forbes AAC, where I provide clinical support to members of AAC teams, with a focus on those who are implementing cough drop. Outside of Forbes AAC, I occasionally provide independent consulting work for a variety of AAC stakeholders. My financial disclosures are that I am a paid employee of Forbes AAC and I provide independent consulting work. My non-financial disclosures are that I am a member of USAC and I am a member of the USAC Awareness Committee. A copy of today's slides is available to download at this link or QR code for your reference after today's session. Today, I hope you leave here with an understanding of the similarities between the participation model and dynamic AAC assessment, the ability to apply the 4 components of mediated learning experience to dynamic AAC assessment, the ability to apply modifiability to the feature matching process to guide the selection of client-appropriate AAC tools to optimize their functional skill development in the short and long term, and an understanding of 3 ways to facilitate progress monitoring with the DAG-3. Do you wonder why a clinician recommends an AAC system that the communicator did not demonstrate AAC proficiency during the AAC assessment? Are you worried that your communicator will not know how to use the AAC system when it arrives because they have never been exposed to AAC before they had an AAC assessment? Do you worry about insurance not paying for a new speech-generating device when your communicator outgrows their current one as they develop their communication and language skills? Do you wonder why the clinician who performed the AAC assessment recommended an AAC tool that seems slightly too robust for the communicator's current skill level? Have no fear. Clinicians inherently consider such things during the AAC assessment process. The participation model was developed to guide AAC assessment and intervention by identifying participation barriers and supports for the communicator. The participation model examines 2 separate overarching types of barriers related to the communicator's use of AAC: opportunity barriers and access barriers. Access barriers refer to how the individual currently communicates, the potential to enhance their speech intelligibility and effectiveness to communicate, the potential for environmental adaptations to enhance their current communication effectiveness, and the potential for the individual to use AAC systems to enhance their communication. Access barriers refer to how the opportunity barriers refer to policies, practices, skills, knowledge, and attitudes regarding AAC that inhibit the communicator's opportunities in various aspects of life. Interventions are then planned and implemented to address such opportunity barriers immediately and into the future. Access barriers refer to how the individual currently communicates, the potential to enhance their speech intelligibility and effectiveness to communicate, the potential for environmental adaptations to enhance their current communication effectiveness, and the potential for the individual to use AAC systems to enhance their communication. The candidacy model. When the clinician looks at the potential for the individual to use AAC systems to enhance their communication, they examine the operational requirements profile, constraints profile, and capability profile of the individual. These profiles provide the clinician with critical information about the communicator's motor skills, cognitive and linguistic skills, literacy skills, and sensory and perceptual skills as they relate to the use of AAC. The candidacy model was used in the 1970s and 1980s to determine who would benefit from AAC intervention. It's a juxtaposition to the participation model. In the candidacy model, clients needed to meet certain criteria to be evaluated for and use AAC. This often resulted in exclusion to access AAC due to performance on formal testing, their medical diagnoses, and/or the results of their response or benefit from previous communication services and interventions. Using the candidacy model really results in restrictive interpretations of the need and benefit of AAC in educational, vocational, and medical contexts, which ultimately restricts access to communication for people. So, for example, if we say that someone with a terminal illness, such as ALS, does not benefit from AAC due to the nature and progression of their diagnosis, this can be grounds for insurance denial. Or if we say an individual needs to have mastered using a non-electronic AAC tool before they can be a candidate for an electronic aided tool in a school setting, we are formalizing this requirement in the educational setting, which has no scientific basis and may ultimately restrict access or delay access to AAC for students. For obvious reasons, the candidacy model is not best practice, and the idea that an individual must have an underlying set of skills or capabilities before they can be evaluated for and use AAC is a misconception that must be debunked. Mediated learning experience is a theory. The participation model was originally developed by Rosenberg and Buchelman in 1987 and has undergone a series of revisions. The most recent is the one we just looked at and is from Buchelman and Miranda in 2013. AAC assessment and intervention is typically guided by the participation model as recommended by the American Speech Hearing Language Association, or ASHA. It is considered evidence-based practice. In the participation model, interventions are designed based on the functional requirements for participation in live activities. There is no set of requirements to make someone a candidate for AAC. Rather, assessment revolves around looking for what the client needs in their AAC system to make communication accessible. The participation model can be viewed as a candidacy model tool. The participation model is based on the assumption that there are multiple barriers that affect participation. Our goal is to decrease the discrepancy or difference between the participation of those who do not have complex communication needs and those who do. The AAC team assesses these barriers over time. So, AAC evaluations are not a one-and-done thing. We are constantly assessing fit and need. The participation model is best practice. It is evident that AAC candidacy should not be determined by whether the communicator possesses certain skills and meets certain criteria. Instead, it should be assumed that everyone and anyone can use and benefit from AAC. The goal of the AAC assessment then is to identify the tools and supports necessary for the individual to grow into an effective and efficient communicator via AAC. This is especially important to remember when the individual has had no experience and exposure to AAC, symbolic representations of language, and/or access methods. In order to achieve such a goal, clinicians use, or should be using, dynamic assessment when evaluating an individual for AAC. So, what makes an assessment dynamic? One of the things that makes it dynamic is that the focus is more on the learning process rather than on how communicators perform on a standardized test or a probe. Therefore, it's really important to be observant of what the communicator is doing during that learning. Dynamic assessment uses a teach-test format where the clinician first teaches the communicator skills using a variety of supports to enhance the communicator's performance in the assessment, and then those skills are tested within the assessment. Dynamic assessment also helps us look at the amount and nature of the assessor investment. So how hard did the evaluating clinician have to work to get the communicator to learn new concepts? It's very interactive, so the clinician makes decisions in the moment about what might help the communicator perform at a higher level. Dynamic assessment is really focused on the process rather than on client outcomes. Beyond providing information about the communicator's skills, dynamic assessment also reveals information about their optimal learning conditions. Because dynamic assessment uses a teach-test format, insights into the rate at which the communicator learns new concepts and the level of support they need to be a successful communicator via AAC are revealed. How do dynamic assessment approaches differ from other assessment approaches, such as standardized assessment or static assessment? Here's a chart that summarizes the key differences between the two approaches. In standardized assessment, participants are passive. The assessor administers tests, and they are not supposed to interfere with the communicator's performance or with their responses. The assessor is not supposed to cue them, so the assessor has a very neutral stance on what they're doing. The assessor's role is to really observe what the communicator can do relatively independently. Standardized assessments are also used to describe needs and areas of difficulty for the communicator. They are administered in a standardized way so that the assessor gives the test the same way every time they give it to a different communicator. Dynamic assessment is essentially the opposite of standardized assessment. In dynamic assessment, both the communicator and the assessor are active participants. The assessor actively participates, intervenes, and supports the communicator's learning during the assessment. They observe, hypothesize, and then provide support to try to enhance the communicator's performance. The goal is to describe modifiability, or how quickly the communicator can learn new concepts and the level of support they need to be a successful communicator via AAC. The protocol is very flexible and adaptable, so the assessor has permission to go off script and make hypotheses about what they think the communicator's AAC support needs are. Briefly implement such support and then see how they do with that. In terms of selecting a specific test to use with dynamic assessment, we want to select a probe or measure that really samples the communication, language, cognitive, and symbolic representation skills of interest. We want it to be something that is sensitive to short-term changes. So, symbols of varying iconicities of a certain referent, for example, might be a better way of probing a client's symbolic representation skills than a broad activity. We want to be able to capture emerging skills, knowledge, and performance. We want to be able to rate something on a scale, per se. Is the communicator's response close to the target? Is it exactly the target, or is it completely different from the target? This helps us to capture what the communicator is learning in a very short amount of time. Mediated learning experience is a theory that suggests that social interaction between a client and an assessor can improve their learning potential, even if they have cognitive or other challenges. The assessor plays a crucial role in facilitating the learning process. Mediated learning experience is the teaching portion of the dynamic assessment. It describes how the assessor intervenes and supports the communicator during the teach phase of the assessment. The assessor develops an activity around principles of mediated learning that are going to support whatever area of need the communicator might have. This is when the assessor uses aided language input, or modeling, and/or other appropriate implementation strategies to support the communicator's learning and skill development as they relate to AAC use. There are 4 components of mediated learning experience. The first component is intentionality. Intentionality is critical in dynamic assessment. It involves a statement of the teaching goal that you share with the communicator. The assessor explains to them why they're doing what they're doing. Explaining the goal to the communicator helps them understand the purpose of that activity in the AAC dynamic assessment. The second component of mediated learning experience is meaning. Meaning is why the assessor needs to know the information about the communicator gained from the assessment. What will it help the communicator do? The assessor should make a statement about how this assessment session is going to help the communicator communicate better. How is that goal related to functional communication and communication competence? The assessor should express the meaning of that goal to the communicator in a way that they understand. There are 4 components of the third component of mediated learning experience is transcendence. The assessor tries to help the communicator make connections between what it is they're doing with you in that short-term assessment and intervention and in school, at home, at work, and in the community. How does the goal and the meaning relate to other activities in the communicator's classroom, in their home, in their community, in their everyday interactions, and in their workplace? How are they going to use this AAC tool and skill beyond the assessment? The fourth component of mediated learning experience is competence. This includes statements that help the communicator use AAC effectively and successfully to communicate. People can often do something in the session with the assessor and/or clinician, but they might not be able to do it on their own in other contexts. The clinician should help the communicator think about strategies that they might use to repair communication breakdowns when they occur, similar to strategic competence of communication competence. How do we use the information gathered from the dynamic assessment to guide the selection of an appropriate AAC tool for the communicator and develop intervention plans? After the assessor lays the foundation of a skill, it's time to retest using the same test used in the test phase of the dynamic assessment. Modifiability is used to describe communicator responsiveness given examiner effort. It really looks at whether the aided language input, or modeling, and/or other appropriate implementation strategies used during the teach phase were effective in supporting the communicator, their learning, and skill development. Feature matching is a process in which the team gathers information about the communicator and the environment based on the participation model that relates to AAC use and matches this information to features of the AAC system. We use a variety of methods within dynamic assessment to gather information, including questionnaires, document review, interviews, observation, engagement in natural activities, conversation, or play, and trial with various AAC strategies and tools. Feature matching is in line with the participation model. It is the opposite of identifying a system and trying to make it work for the communicator. Nothing bugs me more than to hear that a communicator was put on LAMP Words for Life because the family heard that this was the best AAC app for people with that specific diagnosis. Or, the assessor chose to use word power and a Satilla device because it is the only AAC system they really know and thinks it works for everyone. That is not feature matching or meeting the unique needs of each communicator. We must gather information and identify the features needed in an AAC system and match systems to the feature list for each communicator, or else we may be creating access barriers that could have been avoided. Here is a schematic of the feature matching. Next slide. Here is a schematic of the feature matching process. We start by gathering information about the communicator. What are their cognitive skills like, their vision, hearing, motor skills, and language skills? We consider their supports and barriers. We then create a list of features we deem necessary in an AAC system. We take that list and identify various AAC system options. We weigh the advantages and disadvantages of each. Together with the communicator and their family and caregivers, we make a decision on an AAC system to trial using aided language input, or modeling, and/or other appropriate implementation strategies to support the communicator. Modifiability is measured by responsiveness, or how the communicator responded to the aided language input, or modeling, and/or other appropriate implementation strategies used during the teach phase, as well as responsiveness, or how much or how well the communicator's skills responded to or improved after they received that support during the teach phase. The optimal modifiability when selecting an AAC tool for a communicator upon the completion of a dynamic assessment is low assessor effort and high responsiveness. This indicates that the communicator will be able to successfully develop the necessary skills and knowledge to functionally use the AAC tool with minimal challenges. The AAC tool that the assessor recommends, then, is the most appropriate that was identified during the feature matching process that meets the communicator's current skills and needs while facilitating learning and skill development well into the future. It meets their current needs and skills while allowing and facilitating learning and skill development in relation to communication, language, and AAC use. Now that we have decided on an appropriate AAC tool for the communicator, it is time to start intervention planning and setting goals for them. The Dynamic AAC Goals Grid 3 is a great resource for goal setting and intervention planning. It provides a way to systematically assess and/or reassess current skills related to functional AAC use, assists with the development of a comprehensive plan for increasing communicative competence for the communicator, ensures that all communicative competencies are considered in assessment and intervention planning, shows patterns of strengths and weaknesses to help determine the next steps for intervention, acknowledges communicator progress toward communicative competence, and presents a big picture view of the communicator to help develop communication goals for now and the future. The Dynamic AAC Goals Grid 3 includes an ability level continuum guide. This guide is broken into 5 different levels, which are emergent, transitional, context dependent, transitional dependent, and independent. Each of these levels are further segmented into specific areas, including understanding, expression, social interaction, literacy skills, and other. The progress summary is completed based on the communicator's current AAC use, keeping in mind that the communicator may be at different levels for each of the different areas. Information gathered from completing this guide gives insight into the communicator's current skills and strengths in each area. After completing the guide, you can summarize the findings and see an overview of how independent they are within each area. Once this guide is completed, we move on to the next step, which is choosing goals to address in one or more areas. Referencing the information gathered and summarized in the Ability Level Continuum Guide, we use that information to choose potential goals for the communicator within each of the different communicative competencies. Sample goal ideas are provided for each communicative competency, which are linguistic, operational, social, and strategic, and 4 different levels outlined in the Ability Level Continuum Guide. A chain of cues prompting hierarchy is also provided for each goal and level so that you can indicate which level of cueing the communicator currently needs. Using the ability levels and chain of cues provides an opportunity to not only see where the communicator is currently with their AAC use and their independence, but it also allows you to see the next steps to continue progression and independence within each competency. Now that we know where the communicator is in their AAC use journey in reference to each of the communicative competencies, how independent they are within each of the competency areas, and have looked at some possible goal ideas, it's finally time to draft the goals and objectives. The DAG3 contains worksheets that walk us through the goal writing process step by step. AAC goal worksheets are here to help us choose a skill from each of the communicative competencies that we selected within the AAC goals grid, adding in the communication partners, activity, prompting level, and criteria to complete the goal. The DAG3 can be used in 3 different ways in reassessment and progress monitoring. The first way is to look back at the dynamic AAC goals listed by competency and mark any progress in the level of queuing. Be sure to use a different color pen and/or mark the date of reassessment to denote progress monitoring. The second way to use the DAG3 in reassessment and progress monitoring is to use the AAC Goals Periodic Progress Report to record progress in each competency area. Keeping track of the percentage of goals mastered within each competency area will help you track and see when the communicator is ready to move towards a different independence level within each competency. The third way to use the DAG3 in reassessment and progress monitoring is to use the information from the AAC Goals Periodic Progress Report to review the goals you wrote using the AAC Goals Worksheet and revise as needed. After an AAC tool has been chosen for the communicator, it's time to plan and implement interventions for today, now, and tomorrow, the future. How will the AAC team implement the AAC tool across environments and contexts? What implementation strategies are they going to use to facilitate the development of the communicator's language and communication skills? What are the short and long-term goals for the communicator's language and communication skills? Training on how to use the AAC tool must also be provided to members of the AAC team and the communicator. Members of the AAC team also need to be trained on implementation strategies and how to effectively use them with the communicator. With the use of the dynamic AAC Goals Grade 3, the communicator's use of AAC should be continually monitored to ensure that the AAC tool is still allowing the communicator to actively participate in and engage with their environment. If not, follow-up and investigation must occur in order to ensure the communicator's active participation in all areas of life. Sometimes, it's a simple adjustment, and other times, it's a more complex solution. Dynamic assessment is a great way to get started planning. Dynamic assessment is used to determine the most appropriate AAC system that meets the communicator's current skills and needs while facilitating learning and skill development. AAC implementation is a process. AAC proficiency and effective communication cannot be expected upon initial exposure to AAC. Skills are developed over time and the learning process looks different based on the communicator. AAC serves as a tool to help level the playing field, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. Those who have complex communication needs must be given the adequate support, opportunities, and expectations to develop and apply skills. Technology is a tool to help them do so, but it must be accompanied by effective implementation practices, high yet realistic expectations, and other things in order for it to be impactful to those who use AAC. A tool is only as effective as the implementation process accompanying it. As David Buchelman once said, just like a piano alone doesn't make a pianist, nor does a basketball make an athlete, an AAC device doesn't make one a competent, proficient communicator. Those who rely on AAC begin as AAC novices and evolve in competence to become AAC experts with support, encouragement, role models, and teaching strategies. Thanks for joining us today.
Hannah, thank you so much. I've been monitoring the Slack channel and not too many questions, but if anyone wants to pop any in right now, Hannah is more than happy to answer. There was one question about trying to find a little more information from the participation model, and that's from Buchelman and Miranda, 2013, correct, Hannah? Okay. So I shared a link about that. And then that's the really big question we've seen. yeah, we've got a few minutes. If anyone has questions, let me know. And I can share those with Hannah. We got a question in the chat, Hannah, but I'll let you finish what you're typing first.
Any questions, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hannah, we've got a good one for you here. It says, what is your opinion on providing AAC as a universal design for learning approach in classrooms? As Hannah's answering that, just so as a reminder, her slides are available on the website. I can pop that into the Slack chat. And I know some people were having some issues with Google Drive access. Everyone should have access to those now. So again, the question for Hannah is, what is her opinion on providing AAC as a universal design for learning approach in classrooms?
AAC can benefit every student, but one size does not fit all. So going back to feature matching.
Yep, I agree with Hannah. Hannah and I tend to align on a lot of our opinions. Yeah, there's definitely not a one size fits all. And I think that's an important consideration if you are going from that universal design for learning approach. Yeah, great. Other questions? I think that might be, oh, we've got someone typing in here. As I said, yep, she said, great presentation. Thanks, Hannah. All right, well, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Slack. Hannah will be around today and tomorrow, helping moderate as well. So if you have other questions, you can put them in there. And we will wrap up this session and prepare for the next round coming up here in about 15 minutes. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Hannah.